How the Fly Saved the River, written by Andrew Firsk Peters and Polly Peters. In the long ago times, when the world was newly made, a river divided the land in half. The waters of this river were sweet and clean and perfect for drinking. Moose had been travelling for days when he finally came back to the riverbank. He was hot and tired and dusty. He lowered his head to the water's edge and took a giant slurp. "Oh, I have a mighty thirst of this water, and this water sweet as honey," said Moose. He gulped down the water and sighed with contentment. But Moose was not happy with one sip or two, or even 3 or 4. He kept drinking and drinking until the river began to grow more and more shallow. Beaver came bounding up to Moose. "Hey, Moose, what do you think you are doing? My home has fallen apart thanks to you. It's not even underwater anymore." Moose looked down at the creature, who kept well back from his sharp hooves. He wasn't bothered at all. "Beaver, I have a huge thirst, and nothing is going to stop it. Anyway, it has come to my notice that I am a lot bigger than you." Beaver backed away in fear. Moose was right. He was bigger than any of the other beavers. What could she do? Muskrat scurried along the bank towards Moose. "Hey, Moose, what do you think you are doing? If the river becomes any lower, I won't be able to swim about." Moose peered down at Muscat. He really wasn't bothered. "Muscat, let me tell you, I have a giant thirst. Nothing's going to stop it. And let's face the truth, I am so much bigger than you." Muscat crept away in fear. Moose was right. He was a lot larger than any of the other muskrats. What could Muskrat do? By now, the fish were flopping about in the shallows, grasping for breath. "Hey, Moose, what do you think you're doing? If the river runs out of water, we will all die." Moose kneeled down to study the fish. He was definitely not bothered. "Listen, you slimy bunch of floppy fish. I have an enormous thirst. It's so big that nothing will stop it. And the truth is, I am 10 times bigger than the lot of you." The fish darted away into one of the last deep pools. Moose was right. He was a giant compared to the fish. What could they do? At that moment, Fly came buzzing by. He saw the unhappy fish, the miserable Muscat, and the glum beaver. "What's the problem?" he asked. All of the animals told Fly about the moose who was drinking the river dry. "What can we do?" they asked. Fly thought and thought until his brain almost exploded. He said, "the answer is really very simple." Fly flew off and landed right on Moose's nose. "Moose, I want you to give back all the water you stole from the river." Moose burst out laughing. It's a fly! How scared am I? My thirst is as big as a mountain, and no tiny whining creature is going to stop me." Fly's answer was to bite Moose right on the top of his nose. "Ow!" the brave and bold Moose screeched. His nose itched and he felt a lurch deep inside his stomach. Fly bit him again, even harder. "That hurts!" the mighty Moose whimpered. His nose was red and swollen, and all the water he had swallowed was sloshing about inside him. Fly bit him one more time. The huge and heavy moose howled with pain. His belly rumbled like thunder, and his swollen nose burned like a brush fire. Fly could see Moose's body begin to tremble. He hovered high in the air to get away. Moose's eyes were streaming, and his nose felt it was like about to split into two. Suddenly, all that sweet river water didn't taste so good. In fact, Moose felt ill, and all because of the stupid fly. Moose dug his heels deep into the ground as his body quivered like an arrow. He tried to keep his lips shut tight, but it was no good. Achoo! He sneezed, the sound echoing around the hills. Suddenly, all the water in Moose's belly shot up from his stomach, through his throat, and out through his mouth in a great waterfall. It splashed down over his chest and streamed past his legs, finding its way to fill up the river again. Moose no longer had a giant thirst. All he had was an empty belly, a hurting nose, and a wounded pride. He galloped away in shame and was never seen again. And there was the river once more, singing its way through the valleys. Beaver was able to rebuild her home. Muskrat could swim through the deep currents, and the fish darted around in delight. Fly was buzzing with joy, happy to show that if you think and are clever enough, then the small can easily beat the tough.